Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. We'll talk about Tyson Fury and DEREK CHISORA. We'll touch upon Daniel Dubois and KEVIN LARENA as well. Tyson Fury stopped Chisora in the 10th round. The referee pulled the plug after what was quite a one-sided beatdown, the sort of beatdown that I think the vast majority of us expected to see. You know, on this channel, I've always felt that Tyson Fury was potentially one of the best heavyweights of all time. Now, that's a very subjective opinion because he's yet to prove himself to be the king of today's era. You know, he still needs to fight, as far as I'm concerned, the likes of OLEKSANDR USYK, the likes of Anthony Joshua, perhaps even the likes of Joyce. He needs to fight all the top guys in the world today in his era. Now, because I rate him so highly, though, when you analyze a fighter like that and his abilities, you have to look at it through the lens that is quite strict. You're not necessarily comparing him to the number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 guy in the world today. You're considering a fighter that you hold in such high regard among his peers in history. So there were a lot of areas today that I liked that Tyson Fury did, but there were also areas where I think OLEKSANDR USYK, who's also a great fighter and would also go down as an all-time great in my humble opinion, he will look at this fight and he will say, you know what, there's 1 or 2 areas I could potentially exploit here. So let's talk about it a little bit. First and foremost, Chisora did what we felt he needed to do in the preview of this fight. Come in low, change the levels when you're inside low. I felt he needed to come in with a bit more of a cross-arm defense, a little bit more. There were flashes of it, but not really. But ultimately, I wanted him to come in low, perhaps use a cross-arm defense, target the body of Tyson Fury predominantly 80% of the time, and sporadically try to surprise him with an over-the-top right hand. Because if you try to target the head consistently with over-the-top right hands, Fury's very good at leaning back behind that shoulder, and you saw it as well tonight. He's covering that chin behind the shoulder. He'll turn with a shot, he'll slip the shot, he'll make you miss the shot essentially, and then come back with a short counter of his own. And so you've got to surprise him. And in round 4, you saw Tyson Fury go up against the turnbuckle and he did get caught flush on the jaw with an over-the-top right hand. Now, it wasn't going to hurt him. It didn't hurt him. It didn't take him out or anything like that. But this is the sort of area that I felt Chisora had to try and capitalize on. Try and slow him down. Try and see if you can get those feet to slow down. Is he more hittable these days? Can you make him more hittable by slowing him down? And then in the stretch, if you haven't taken too much punishment, perhaps you're going to land something big. Perhaps you can wear him down. The chances of Chisora winning, as we said, were pretty remote, and that is what we saw. But from his perspective, the tactics I felt were spot on. He did what he could do. With regards to Tyson Fury, however, there were areas where I thought he was very good. It looked like a more throwback version of Tyson Fury. He was not as destructive as the Fury we saw against Deontay Wilder. He was not as destructive as the Fury we saw against Dillian Whyte. Now, why is this? Is this because those guys aren't as durable as people perhaps assumed they were? Or is it because he's changed up his style a little bit? Was it because in those fights he had a more, a mindset where he's thinking, right, I really want to punch through the target. I want to bring that Kronk style in. I want to really hurt guys. And he's thinking in that destructive fashion. Or is it just a case of their own limitations meant that Fury's power seemed magnified? That's one of the things you're going to have to think about. Now, additionally to that, he was moving better than I thought he would be moving. In the third Deontay Wilder fight, he wasn't retreating back from that right hand as much as he did, as quickly as he did, as effectively as he did in the first couple of fights. And we spoke about the preview as to what he needed to do, the preview to that third Wilder fight, how he was taking away Deontay Wilder's hand. Wilder will often cock it around the chest area and he'll step in with a deep jab and then almost whip around the right hand from that angle. The minute you see him step in, Fury in the first and second fight, particularly the second fight, he would step back and raise his arms. So he's creating a barrier to hide behind as he's retreating. And as that shot's coming over, he's blocking it as he's stepping back. And he'll step back at an angle away from the right hand, and he'll often take away what was on the right hand of Wilder. In the second fight, he tried to smother that right hand. He'd have that high guard and he'd move in. So before it reaches the maximum width from that chest, before it ends and the power ends at the tip of the shot, he's trying to catch the shot before it fully extends. And I felt as though perhaps the reason for that is that his feet weren't as fast. They weren't as sharp as they used to be. And we're seeing a decline in that regard for Fury. And so he's decided to adjust his game, add new wrinkles, bring in Sugar Hill to become a more destructive puncher so that he can evolve as a fighter and change up his style a little bit. You've seen other fighters do this. George Foreman became a very different fighter in the second part of his career compared to the first part, and so on and so forth. Well, today, he moved a lot better than I expected him to. Now, Chisora is not the fastest footed guy in the world, but you saw there were some really fast micro movements from Tyson Fury. But he wasn't as destructive as he used to be in those last few fights. So it's more of a throwback Fury, a Fury who was more the boxer who's luring you onto shots, pouring out the jab, varying it. Sometimes there's not much on the jab. They're almost like these little backhands, and he's just catching you with a knuckle just to distract you and change the angle on you. And sometimes nothing follows in, so you can't really time the jab. Other times he'll follow up with that straight right hand. He was using the uppercut to great effect when he was stepping back. So when Chisora would try and come inside and try and bypass that jab, Fury will take that half step and then whip in this uppercut. Now, Fury doesn't have the biomechanics of someone like Anthony Joshua, who's going to dip low, with his big muscular thighs, dip really low, carry that weight, and then shoot up the uppercut and twist through and make it a really destructive punch. It's more of an arm punch for Fury. But Fury's a lot more naturally agile and flexible than Anthony Joshua. So the way in which he brings his punches together are different. He's got this languid, ill-like sort of movement. So he'll bring in the uppercut and then he steps away, and it looks gangly. But for the football fans out there, it's kind of like Nwankwo Kanu. You remember Kanu, the Arsenal striker, former Nigerian international? He'll be running, and he was so tall and skinny and gangly, people thought he was almost going to fall over. And yet he would pull out some ridiculous skill where he shows that actually his balance is pretty incredible, his agility is incredible, but it's not just beautiful to see aesthetically. Some of that applies to Tyson Fury. But there's also an element of him whereby, because he's got such long arms, when Del was staying at mid-range and he was changing the levels and coming up and down, Fury might land that first uppercut, but when he would try and follow up with a combination, so say with hooks, he might want to land in one uppercut and then follow up with two hooks. He was often quite inaccurate. And one of the reasons is that those arms have got a long way to travel. They're not short, tight hooks. So first and foremost, when the target's moving, he has to then try and adjust off the cuff, which is difficult. Then he needs to throw the other hand in, which he wings in, and he's got to reset those long arms. Those long arms, levers, have to come back to fire off again. It's not short power. He's not an Andy Ruiz or an Alexander Povetkin. He's not an Anthony Joshua in that regard, who's got some nice tight shots. Fury's at his best when he's throwing individual pot shots or individual jabs from range, and when he's toying with you and making you almost feel like you're fighting a ghost, a slippery eel, a mirage. But one of the beautiful things about Fury is that adjustability and adaptability. Horses for courses, different strokes for different folks. You can use whatever phrase you want to use. That's what he's capable of doing. He's capable of boxing you from range. If he does come close at in a mid-range, when it comes to combinations, he's not amazing. But notice how he adjusts to that and brings his body into play. He'll throw an individual shot, and if he misses that individual shot, he'll often come inside all the way in and clatter you with his body and lean into you. And there are points where Chisora was up against the ropes and he's almost hugging the ropes and holding onto the ropes and pushing Chisora and leaning on him and making him carry him. These things take it out of your legs. They wear you down. You're a heavyweight who's having to work at a tempo and then carry another big heavyweight's weight on top of you, right? So he can do that on the inside and wear you down on the inside. He can box you from range. He can switch orthodox or southpaw to consistently change the angles on you. And he's very, very difficult to get to and land flush on. And when you do, he's got very good rates of recovery. But if you are Alexander Usyk, you're going to look at this and you're going to think, this guy's not as technically tight as me. If he's going to beat me in a boxing match, he's going to beat me because he's so slippery, and he's going to be able to maintain range and slip back and lure me onto shots. If I'm able to be the one who dictates the distance, and I can come in when I want to come in and get out when I want to get out, and we exchange on my terms, I'm the better technical boxer. From an orthodox technical perspective, who throws the punches correctly, who's going to be able to get combinations flowing more fluidly, it's Alexander Usyk. But we go back to that concept of adjustability. Fury can do a whole host of things. If he's losing the boxing match, he may be able to start leaning on Usyk and making it a dirty fight. He may be able to turn it into a brawl, a fight, not a boxing match, a fight. Now, that doesn't guarantee he wins the fight. You're talking about two all-time great fighters, in my opinion, coming up against each other. But we're just talking about areas that Usyk will look at and think, I can capitalize there. And we're looking at other areas where we're saying Usyk's feet look so much superior. Well, today, Fury still looked light on his feet. And yes, Chisora was able to close the gap a little bit more and get to him more effectively than he did in that second fight. And when you consider that Chisora's feet aren't perhaps as fast as they used to be, you have to ask yourself why. Is it because Fury's feet have slowed comparatively to back then? Or is it just a case of him wanting to have been more destructive today? And if it was the latter, why wasn't he more destructive? Is it because his power isn't what it appeared to be against Wilder and White? Is Chisora just a very naturally tough man and that's that? Or was it because Fury had decided to switch it up and prepare differently? In other words, maybe Fury can only fight in certain ways based on how he prepares. For him to be destructive, he has to be big and heavy. That's something that John Fury felt, remember, post the Otto Wallin fight. In order for him to be mobile, he can't come in ultra heavy like he did against Deontay Wilder in the second and third fight. Now, if that applies, and that's true, how he prepares will determine how much he can adjust. When his greatest weapon is his adjustability, that could be a potential problem for Fury going into the Usyk fight. You see what I'm saying? So, listen, there's a lot to look at, a lot to unpack here. I will rewatch the fight and I may do a follow-up video and talk about some additional technical elements here, but I thought it was a great performance from some perspectives. His ability to move, these little micro movements he does, his ability to tie up, I thought was very good as well. Not just to tie up and hold, but really to nullify what Dell was trying to do on the inside, and he would be slippery on the inside too. So when Dell would release his arms and let go of shots, Fury's still hard to land on. There were some elements that were not as great. He wasn't as destructive as he has been in recent fights. And at inner mid-range or outer mid-range even, when he's trying to let go of combinations, he didn't look as fluid or as sharp as some of his counterparts. Let me know what you think about that. Now, regarding Daniel Dubois and Kevin Lorena, let me just quickly touch on that. Daniel Dubois went down 3 times in the first round. He ended up getting a stoppage in the third round. Look, I'm a fan of Daniels. And for a long time, I've been here and I've been saying people are harsh on Dubois. They don't realize how good he is. He's a very good boxer puncher. He's a little bit stiff, we know that, but he's talented. He's a talented young fighter. A lot of people talk about this guy like he's washed. He gave Joe Joyce a very good fight up until he took the knee. A lot of people had Dubois ahead at that point, and if you had Joe Joyce ahead, it would have been by a round. It was a touch and go type of fight, a round or two either way. Well, since then, a lot of people have gotten off the Dubois hype train. They feel as though he's a quitter. Today he showed a lot of heart. And to me, in the first round, it looked like he had a real issue with his Achilles heel or his ankle. The way he was stepping and then going down, it wasn't from punches. He seemed to hurt his foot. So to continue going after that and to get the stoppage in the third round, it shows he's got a willingness to show some heart. And I've said on this channel in the past, when people quit, they can go one of two ways. It either goes the way that Tyson Fury's always alluded to, where he always says, once you swallow, you'll always swallow. Once you quit and you realize no one's killed me here, no one's, I still got a life. It's not the worst thing in the world. I quit. It was embarrassing, but I can deal with that. Then it becomes easier to quit again and again and again. And it's why you have some fighters who are willing to throw in the towel quite consistently. There's another way, though, that it can potentially go. And that is that you become so disgusted at yourself and so enraged at the mockery that you got that you can't take that anymore. And as a result of that, you bite down on your gumshoe and you say, right, I'm going to war. And it makes you more vicious in some regards. Maybe that's the way Daniel Dubois has gone. Maybe he's willing to bite down on a gumshoe now in a way that he never used to be willing to bite down on. So you've got to give him credit for that. Having said all that, I also need to add this. A lot of people talk about hometown decisions in the UK, a lot of American fans, and I always say that this is massively overstated. You hear this a lot from American fans, but we see it in the US all the time. It's promoted fighters wherever you go that get hometown decisions. I'm sorry, it always happens, regardless of where you're at. The UK is no worse than anywhere else, typically speaking. However, today, that doesn't add weight to my position at all. Because when Daniel Dubois went down, unless the clock of the TV was wrong, he got up after the end of that third knockdown in the first round. And with 5 seconds still to go in the round, the referee pointed him to the corner after the bell had gone. They stopped that round 5-6 seconds too early. Now, if you're 5-6 seconds to go when you're that hurt, you're talking potentially another 1 or 2 big shots coming your way. That could take you out. Kevin Lorena could have potentially knocked him out. And to add insult to injury, in the third round, when Lorena got stopped, he was on the end of a really heavy-handed combination, and Dubois seemed a bit heavy-handed at that point. Like he was slowing, like he was a bit slow. You know, they weren't explosive shots. Are we seeing lactic acid build up here? You don't know what's going to happen in that next round. What happens is he's covering up, he's getting hurt. The bell goes, he sort of falls back into the ropes and is up immediately. So if there was a count, if he'd been counted for falling into the ropes, he would have been up at the count of 1. a little bit dazed. He would have had his standing 8 count, then he would have been fine. And the bell's gone, and instead of saying to him, okay, go back to your corner, the referee's waved the fight off. So you've sort of waved him off after the bell has gone at the end of the round. And I know you cannot be saved by the bell, right? You have to be ready to fight. But he got up and he was ready. What is that? It's shocking, man. And it does. And I listen, like I said, I defend British boxing from the criticisms that it gets that I feel are not unwarranted, but no different to where you see in other nations. But today did not add credence to my position, because that was shocking. Kevin Lorena is going to be fuming at that. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, about both fights. Where do you see Tyson Fury going from here with regards to OLEKSANDR USYK? They got on the apron post-fight and he was screaming in his face. Usyk either didn't understand a word he was saying or he was expecting that sort of verbal onslaught. He had this wry smile on his face and he's just staring directly into the eyes of Fury. And when Fury would finish each rant, he'd pause, almost like he was waiting for a retort, and it didn't come. Then he'd go off again. And I'm just wondering whether that sort of thing can affect Fury too. When you're so good at getting in the mind of another opponent and then he doesn't allow you to do it, does it then backfire and start to affect you psychologically? That's something else you've got to think about as well. Let me know what you think regarding Daniel Dubois as well, and where you think he goes from here. Are you judging him and looking at it from a positive perspective and saying, listen, he seemed to have an issue with his feet. He didn't really seem to be getting knocked down because he was getting battered. He seemed to have a real problem with his foot, and he showed heart and grit and determination. So that's another notch on the bedpost, and it gives me more respect for him and it makes me rate him more. Or are you looking at it and saying, he just fought a guy who, good fighter, but used to be a cruiserweight, and he had some real problems again, and when he gets in against another monster in the heavyweight division, he's going to have problems once again. Let me know how you observe everything. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.